There are other worlds than these, and thankfully for us, horror fiction and the wider world of literature seems to have quite the knack for creating some of the most unfathomably terrifying realms of pure nightmare fuel for us to sweat over and hope that we never ever accidentally wake up in these strange new lands. There's nothing quite like turning the pages of horror fiction as our poor unassuming narrators tread their way through ancient and terrifying lands, tiptoeing around slumbering abominations and wondering why in the hell they ever thought that this was a good idea in the first place. After all, as Bilbo Baggins himself told us, it's a dangerous business going out your door. Hello horror fans, what's going on? And once again, welcome back to the Scary Channel on YouTube, top 5 scary videos. As per usual, I'll be your horror host Jack Finch, as today we curiously take a look at the top 5 most terrifying places in literature. Roll the clip.
Let me show you.
For the curious amongst you, that clip was from 1997's Event Horizon, an awesome movie filled to the brim with more existential hell dimensions of eternal torture and pain than what you may have first expected. After all, hell is only a word, the reality is much, much worse. It leads us to an important point though, because many of the nightmare realms that have sealed their fate in literature are a portrayal of the stereotypical view of the Abrahamic hell. Fire and brimstone, you know the drill. And while some of them are much more terrifying than others, and yes, have found their way onto this list, we have to give an honourable mention to all of the mythological realms that came before it. Hades, hell with a single L, the Egyptian underworld, yeah, you get the picture. Kicking off at number 5, the Labyrinth. Because when we're talking about hell and the underworld, Clive Barker's interpretation of demons to some, angels to others is a completely different kettle of fish, where all manners of body horrors and dimensional demonic entities find themselves an equally terrifying house and home, which is aptly named Hell, or the more structurally appropriate, the Labyrinth. First penned in Barker's 1986 novella The Hellbound Heart, and later expanded upon in the Scarlet Gospels, as well as the film and graphic novel series that followed. In Barker's world, his demonic Cenobites reside eternally in an unholy and evil realm of limitless pain or pleasure, if you're into that kind of thing. In its natural state, hell takes on the form of the dark, winding labyrinth most commonly visualized in the graphic series, but it also has the power to take on any shape or state depending on the amassed pleasures or pains of the souls that are contained within it. Now, because of that, it has widely been speculated and somewhat confirmed by Barker that this is definitely not the Abrahamic version of hell, but instead an extra dimension. In essence, the Labyrinth is some form of permeable realm that can be perceived as heaven or hell by whoever is trapped inside. It's led some to believe that the Labyrinth itself represents the true nature of the human mind and all of the infinite possibilities that reside within the cracks of reality. And you know, that's also not really accounting for the fact that it's ruled over by the eternal evil Leviathan, a creature of ancient chaos that perpetually levitates at the geographical center of the Labyrinth, watching over his hellish kingdom, raising towering sky-blotting monoliths to glorify his dominion over the Cenobites and mankind. I mean, for the most part, despite being one of the most hellish depictions of hell itself, you can't deny that Barker created an incredibly interesting landscape for horror fiction. Coming in at number 4, Dante's Inferno. Because if we're talking about hell, then finally we can mention the resounding work of classic literature, the 14th century epic poem that made up the first part of Dante's Divine Comedy, one of the most important works in the whole of canonical literature, and the allegorical progenitor of pretty much every hellish realm ever written after that. Also, this particular point goes out to the steadfast dedication of our top 5 scary viewer, Spencer Beard. Although we can't do an entire top 5 list of Dante's punishments, we can definitely condense them into one. So yeah, there we have it. Thanks. Now, as many of you will already know, Dante's depiction of hell is the archetype that laid the foundation for the vast majority of horror fiction, although it may not be as apparent as you may think. In the poem that begins on the evening of Maundy Thursday, the narrator, Dante himself, finds himself lost in a dark, dark wood, and after being nearly ravaged to death by 3 beasts, a leopard, a lion, and a wolf, he's rescued by the ghost of the Roman poet Virgil, who leads him through the gates of the underworld to begin a journey of the very fabric of the Abrahamic religion. And of course, what better place to begin than with hell. In Dante's Inferno, hell is depicted as 9 concentric circles of eternal pain and torment, located deep within the bowels of the earth. These consist of limbo, lust, gluttony, greed, wrath, heresy, violence, fraud, and treachery, each of them dedicated to facilitating astutely specific and horrifying torments to bind any hateful soul for eternal punishment. Perhaps the worst of these is the Malbolge, the 8th circle of hell that consists of the 10 Bolges, a series of deep ditches where fraudsters, grifters, and thieves alike are dismembered and disemboweled over and over for eternity by a host of demons. Yeah, it's a pretty nasty place. Next up at number 3, Arrakis. Because talking about nasty and equally inhospitable places, Frank Herbert's fascinating and terrifying desert planet of Arrakis that makes up the homeworld of his fantastic sci-fi epic novel Dune is perhaps its own version of hell for those not willing to adapt to the relentless trials and torments that lurk deep within it. For those of you that haven't read Frank Herbert's Dune saga, please do, although they are pretty lengthy books, so I'll forgive you if you choose to watch David Lynch's 1984 film instead, because they're both great, although the books are better. The fact of the matter is though, when it comes to Arrakis, there's a lot to get through, so I'll try and condense things as much as possible. As laid out in the Dune saga, the planet of Arrakis is a desert wasteland battered eternally by scorching heat and a dry, arid climate where pretty much nothing can live or grow, save for a few hardy species of mice. Oh, and yeah, of course, a population of giant freaking sandworms that live deep within the planet's surface, erupting out of the desert wasteland to destroy anything and everything whenever they feel like it. You might be thinking, well, why would anyone ever want to go to Arrakis then? And well, that's because the planet itself is the most valuable planet in the cosmos, and at the beginning of the saga, it is the only place in the Duneverse that produces spice, an incredibly powerful resource that powers spaceflight, and whoever controls the spice controls the destiny of mankind, and thus begins the eternal struggle and chaotic political espionage that is Frank Herbert's Dune saga. Because although we've somewhat touched on the geographical horrors that lie within Arrakis, we haven't even gotten close to how damn violent and dangerous living on this planet would be if you somehow found yourself as a character in the novel, especially if your last name is Atreides and your first name just so happens to be Paul. Yeah, sometimes it doesn't matter what material terrors are lurking within a fictional world, because if you fill it with enough villains, assassins and bloodthirsty berserkers, it kind of just writes itself. Swinging in at number 2, Kimora. And truth be told, we couldn't really do this list without somewhere mentioning the grim darkness of the Warhammer 40k universe, and although there are more nightmarish worlds and dimensions of pure chaos that make up the fictional realm, perhaps the most terrifying of them all is the dark city of Kimora, the vile, obscene and impossibly evil home of the Dark Eldar. In the Warhammer universe, the city itself is said to be impossible for any outsiders to find, and it is widely believed to be hidden deep within the interdimensional labyrinth of the Webway, a corrupted version spreading out across the cosmic chaos like a virus. Because of that, Kimora is a city of impossible creation, linked together by shimmering dimensional shortcuts, portals that are scattered throughout the galaxy, sometimes light years apart, but bound together by the chaos of the Dark Eldar's corruption. I mean, Kimora is such an evil place that even the shadows that slink through the city have a habit of consuming its inhabitants. Not like it matters either, as Kimora's population is estimated to be more than most star systems and is considered to be bigger than even mankind's largest hive cities combined. And it's also important to note that the population is comprised of some of the most evil, treacherous and violent individuals in the entire Warhammer universe. Trillions of them, all condensed into one sprawling viral city, and truth be told, Kimora puts to shame pretty much every other den of evil in fiction. Mordor can move over, forget about Azkaban or any of its ilk. In fact, when Ben Kenobi told Luke Skywalker that he couldn't find a more wretched hive of scum and villainy than Mos Eisley, he obviously had never visited Kimora. And finally, coming in at our number 1 spot, the Dreamlands. Because, of course, we cannot talk of terrifying places in literature without paying homage to Lovecraft's most complete and horrifying dimensions, the Dreamlands. The fact of the matter is, we could probably make an entire list out of Lovecraft's bizarre and terror-inducing alien planets, but it's in the extra-dimensional impossibility of the landscape that he described in his dream cycle where the horror that we all share lies. Because what could be more terrifying than a realm that we could all potentially access, in theory anyway? First noted in his 1918 short story Polaris, and as described in perhaps his most complete novella, The Dream Quest of Unknown Kadath, Lovecraft went on to fully flesh out the Dreamlands in a series of short stories written between 1918 and 1932, portraying entire cities of moon beasts, man-eating spiders, vast plateaus of satyr men that worship toad priests, and castles of ancient design perched upon mountains of black rock. The thing is, like with many of Lovecraft's cosmic horror, it comes with the magnitude of not knowing where this land begins and where it ends. The Dreamlands could be infinite, and as Randolph Carter discovered in The Dream Quest of Unknown Kadath, the terrifying extent to this place is limited only by the human imagination. Oh, and also not only that, but of course, nowhere is safe from the outer gods, not even human consciousness, because the crawling chaos himself, Nyarlathotep, holds dominion over the Dreamlands, slowly pulling the strings and puppeteering his way across the realm, corrupting dreamers and lost souls alike, as well as the unfortunate races that populate its bizarre and impossible landscape. Essentially, the Dreamlands is Lewis Carroll's Alice Wonderland, except instead of slipping through a looking glass or falling down a rabbit's warren, you could accidentally find yourself in this place during a bad dream and then become addicted to the mysteries and infinite curiosity of its design, and before you know it, you're a dream junkie searching for Kadath like Randolph Carter. Yeah, if you couldn't tell, this place is messed up. Well, there we have it, horror fans, our list for the top 5 most terrifying places in literature. What do you guys think? Do you agree, disagree, or do you have any more to add of your own? Let us know your thoughts down in the comment section below. Before we depart from today's video though, let's first take a quick look at some of your more resounding remarks from over the past few days. Soul Maiden Desard says, okay Jack, if you were going to be eaten by a zombie, who would be the one you'd want to be eaten by? And that is an absolutely great question. I'm assuming that this is any zombified person from history, right? Tough one. Okay, come on, it'd be pretty great to be eaten by zombie Shakespeare, wouldn't it? Although, zombie Boudica is a pretty close contender, so that'd be insane as well. Yeah, either or. Shakespeare or Boudica. Well, on that note, unfortunately that's what we've got time for in today's video. Just stick around all the way until the end. If you were a fan of this video or just top 5 scary videos in general, then please be a dear and hit that thumbs up button, as well as that subscribe button, and I'll be seeing you in the next one. As per usual, I've been your horror host Jack Finch. You've been watching top 5 scary videos, and until next time, you take it easy.